That's what that is. Really, everything that we've talked about this evening can really all be surmised by this quote. This is a Harvard medical professor who was a tenured Harvard medical professor who walked away from his very well-established, lucrative, tenured career when he started to realize that there's more to what he was teaching his medical students. Harvard Medical School walked away from it. He is the one that coined this term that says the function of the nervous system is to perceive the environment, internal and external, and coordinate the behavior of all of the cells, right? And so that's what we're talking about earlier today, is perceiving internal noise, information, communication, perceiving the external environment, and adapting, coordinating accordingly, right? So let me ask you the question, right? How do we build something? How do all the homes that we're in, every building that we're in, how do we build something to last? How do we build it strong, sturdy? Foundation is kind of important, really important. The most important, the best answer of the evening, yeah. So super, super important, the crucial, that's the first step, right? So here you can tell we have all of the material to build the home. It's bundled up. We're not putting it in use because the foundation isn't there first, right? So really when it comes to health, I just want to kind of share that analogy that that's exactly what we're talking about next. And I like to lovingly put this as, this ain't no chicken or the egg, right? The foundation is what comes first. Everything else gets built upon or amplified on top of that. So I would like to say that this is a human developing nervous system. Admittedly, this is like a zebrafish, whatever that is. But this does show how, in those early developmental stages, what the first thing is to develop and how. And this is the same thing that goes on in all vertebrate organisms, I should say. But you can see here, very first thing is the primitive notochord, which then becomes the spine. Branching out from there are all of the nerves, extending out, not just to different parts of the body, but going to communicate with every single cell and tissue and organ of the body. That's the first thing to develop, and everything gets built upon from that. That communication network and hierarchy is how the brain gets all of this information. You can see how intricate this is. In Atlanta, they have what was called the Bodies exhibit, which is just a remarkable, it's basically art meets anatomy, dissection, and all that sort of stuff. But they actually had they had cadavers where they extracted the cytoplasm, they extracted everything other than the nervous system, and it was so intimately intact that you could see the details of the facial features of the individual. You would recognize who the person is. That's how detailed and interconnected the nervous system is in our body. So again, going back to common approaches to healthcare, is we might see a baby or kiddo suffering with poor tone, poor coordination. So physical therapy, awesome, love it, rock on. We might see that they have some gut, digestion, autoimmune challenges. So that develops poor digestion, allergies, immune response. So therapies, specialists, medications. Cool, rock on. Brain challenges. Again, I mentioned earlier, cognitive, behavioral, emotional regulation, learning, memory, communication, perception. So speech-language pathologists, counselors, medications, all these sorts of stuff, right? But what they don't ever address is really the question at the bottom is, but why do we have these problems in the first place? There's something missing to the picture, or in this case, something missing to this pyramid, and that is the role of the brain, the central nervous system, the autonomic nervous system, everything that we've been talking about earlier tonight, right? So really this slide right here demonstrates what we call the hierarchy of healing, or the hierarchy of neurological development. The first thing, as you saw in that video, to develop is the central nervous system, the autonomic nervous system. Then that starts to develop and coordinate as the motor system. We start to develop more of the gut immune system, brain, emotional, all that sort of stuff is kind of the culmination of everything else being developed properly underneath, right? So what happens, again, this is just kind of showing brain, ultimate expression of life with all the cognitive behavioral challenges. So what happens is everything that we talked about earlier, the 3 T's, the early and often stressors that kiddos face, autonomic nervous system, shut down, shut off. We then develop all these other problems that we mentioned, right? We like to kind of lovingly refer to this as there should be a closed loop, brain communicating with body, body communicating with brain, oftentimes referred to as the safety pin cycle. When that nervous system is shut off, disconnection happens. Disconnect. Brain is not able to perceive properly the body, so it's not able to properly adapt, send that communication signal for growth, for digestion, for sleep, for rest, all these sorts of things. So we have delayed motor milestones, a poor digestion, overreactive or hyperreactive or underreactive immune system, low vagal tone, low parasympathetic tone. Again, tying all of this back in together, how all the traumas, the early interventions, the toxins, the anxiousness, the nervousness, all that sort of stuff plays into everything. So we have physiological stress as a result of all of that. Again, everything adding up. We know as adults, as human beings, stress amplifies. You go to sleep, you wake up, you might feel a little bit better, but get back into that stressful situation. We're kind of right back there, where we started. So same thing with kiddos. Stress gets amplified early and often, and leads us into that stuck sympathetic mode. So another Bruce Lipton quote, which is hugely valuable and important, again, the same tenured medical school professor, who says, a cell cannot be both in protection, I put in there, right, to translate it into our talk, cannot be both in sympathetic mode and in growth, parasympathetic mode, at the same time. Now it's important to ask yourself, why? And he answers that by saying, this is because each mode requires different resources and activities, and cells must balance between these two states based on need and the environment. When I read this quote, it makes me think of, there's one little girl that a colleague shared this story with me. He saw this 4-year-old little girl, came to his office when he was 4 years old, but really when she was 2 years old, she had an incident or an accident where she fell off the edge of a picnic table, kind of hyperextended her neck. Her parents knew that, hey, there was I don't know, like that was not really cool and all that sort of stuff. But for the next 2 years, they started to notice developmental challenges. Her growth was stunted. In those 2 years since that incident, she had only gained 2 pounds. Between 2 and 4 years old, only 2 pounds. She started getting under care, and within 6 months of regular care, chiropractic care, she actually gained 7 pounds and was starting to catch up. She was able to then kind of better regulate and better have better relationships with her siblings and all this sort of stuff. But really, her growth caught up, and that's what this slide makes me think of: is accident, physical trauma triggers protection mode. That protection mode is sympathetic dominance. You cannot be in both growth and protection at the same time. So her body is stuck for 2 years in just caution, safety, survival mode. And so her growth was then stunted. Under care, we're able to help activate the parasympathetic mode, get her back into recovering. So again, throwing a lot at it. So again, another moment of brevity and levity. Take a deep breath, another sip. This was a kind of family photo album around Easter, little Rowan here around Easter. One shot. You get one shot to put some bunny ears on a cat and try to make something come out, and that was it. We said, that's it. Cut, we're done, we're moving forward.
I just took a picture of my cat yesterday with a whole outfit on, and it posed 300 different ways.
Yeah. So see, yeah, you're much better behaved cat than mine.
Is she a chiropractor?
Apparently so, yeah. So. to kind of wrap all of this sort of up. So our role as a chiropractor is to really look at where is this stress being stuck, where is this stress being stored, how is it being stored, torque, counter torque, what is the first things to really address. And that's really what the neurological certification really taught is, as chiropractors, we all know that like the importance of the upper cervical, right? But in these kiddos, especially with the more challenging cases, whether we're talking about seizures, autism, things like that, you can't just get in there. They're not going to let you, and they also might not be ready for that yet. We have to find areas where things are really suppressed, exhausted, get these areas activated online, and kind of build up to that. So that's really where kind of customizing and tailoring a care plan is really where that comes into place. So as chiropractors, we find where is that disconnection. We remove that by hand, throw that bad boy in the trash, reconnect the brain-body connection, which restores balance between sympathetic, parasympathetic dominance, improves then that motor connection, improves gastric immune response, and we develop appropriate vagal tone. So I mentioned earlier a lot of other therapies, right? PT, OT, physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech pathologists, all these sorts of things. We work very well in conjunction. One thing that we hear is that they're oftentimes able to get better results in less time once kiddos that they've maybe been seeing for some time start to get this calm balance restored to their nervous system. Both things are able to work synergistically for better results and outcomes. So it's a process of collaboration, not exclusivity one way or the other or anything like that. So that's one very important thing to keep in mind. So the perfect storm algorithm, what we look at is, again, we do a very deep dive case history, if you want to put it that way. The mentor who taught the whole certification, his mentor taught him that if you really want to change and transform these kiddos' lives and their health outcomes, essentially, is dive in deep and listen to mom. So that's the first step. Is we dive in deep. We want to know what happened, how it happened early on, how often. So we look at how much stress was experienced early on, when did it occur, how often did it occur, and that all plays into, again, customizing the degree, the frequency, how long care might need to be for that kiddo. So we'll kind of skip through that. So really, again, going back to pediatric chiropractic care, as you saw with the video on Miles, right? It's not any Rambo, Rocky Balboa, and anything like that. It's a very loving, just very precise touch, very precise focus intent to really calm and restore and bring balance to the nervous system. It looks nothing like an adult adjustment or anything like that. I often relate it to, if you ever go to Publix, Winn-Dixie, wherever, the IGA, you're picking up a tomato, you're checking for its ripeness. That amount of pressure that you use to just see is it ripe or not, that's typically about the amount of pressure that's used for a pediatric adjustment, and really oftentimes with pinkies, because with, our structures are much bigger than theirs. And again, I hope that you've kind of seen that it's not always just for kiddos with problems per se, right? It's just a valuable proactive approach to healthcare. Remove that neurological stress. We collaborate with other healthcare providers. So my wife actually works up in St. Augustine inside of what's called the St. Augustine Birth Collective, a community of midwives, doulas, pediatricians, lactation consultants, and more, acupuncturists, all that sort of stuff, catered and centered around serving mothers in this perinatal phase and period. So again, just kind of expressing that collaborative approach. But we help kiddos reach their developmental milestones. If they're delayed, catch up to their developmental milestones and move forward with that. So it's all about giving your child's developing body the best foundation for lifelong health and optimal function. So again, why have we never known about this? It goes back to, it's easy to miss something that you were not looking for. We're going to skip over that. So again, going back to, there's in the previous slide video of the cesarean, but this is something that oftentimes we're not really aware of. I have one friend who recently gave birth, and it's unfortunately common for dads to be like, oh, I don't want to have anything to do with that. I don't want to see that. I don't want to. But really, that's kind of like our only lifeline to really know and see what was that process really like, right? Mom is on another end. She's a little bit preoccupied, right? So really, like, it's just valuable and important to know really what took place, what happened. So in our office, we have that 3-step approach. First thing, really listen to mom. Let's dive in deep. Let's get that case history. Let's really see kind of where these stressors happen, how early, how often. We actually recently invested in a bit of scanning technology that, again, it's said that the most complex thing that we know of in the universe is actually between our ears. It's our brain, the most complex thing that we know of. So as such, it's not really something that we can very easily determine and measure and quantify with just one metric, right? So we have some scanning technology that measures the function and the performance of the nervous system in 3 ways. The gold standard to measure autonomic function, again, stress or parasympathetic, sympathetic or parasympathetic dominance, is HRV, heart rate variability. It measures the time and interval in between heartbeats. Tells us if you're kind of stuck in sympathetic dominance or if you have that good balance. So that's one tool that we use to measure that. We also measure with thermography, kind of tells us kind of regionally where along the spine nervous system is the brain not really able communicating to regions and then organs of the body, right? Where is that communication suppressed based on thermal imaging? And then also we're able to measure with surface EMG, electromyographs, which measures the electrical conductance of the muscles next to the spine, meaning where are we holding on to tension? That can also demonstrate that torque component I talked about, that counter torque. So we're really quantifying and measuring in 3 different ways, and we use all of that information to come up with a customized care plan for each individual kiddo. Some common things to look for in newborns, what we refer to as Jet syndrome, jaw being deviated, they're yawning, they're crying, and that jaw is constantly being deviated to one side. It's not on there, but clenched fists, chronically clenched fists. That's one thing that we had with Miss Rowan. But it's a little bit difficult to see in the middle picture. Eye asymmetry, meaning one eye may be higher than the other, maybe a little bit bigger than the other, maybe one seems a little bit more forward, backwards. That's all kind of showing distortion, which translates to tension somewhere in their system, right? And then also kind of what's commonly known, right, that torticollis or similar presentation, where they just have a preference. They favor either head tilt with rotation, but again, that's going to interfere with latching and all that sort of stuff. Can also play into plagiocephaly, deformation of the developing skull, where they might have a flattened skull, kind of different things like that. So all things that we can help out with chiropractic. So in conclusion, there's a pediatrician, London Smith, Dr. Smith, that would say every newborn should receive a neck and spine examination and a chiropractic adjustment if necessary, only if necessary. Is that idea too difficult to accept, right? That's really what we're talking about. That's really why the importance. That's a huge marathon that they ran day 1 or day 0, right? And then everything just gets compounded and amplified on top of that. So really, like I said earlier, huge need for resources in the community. So that's really where my wife and I really are eager to be of service, to step up, to get this message out to the community. So again, I cannot thank you enough for your presence, for your attention, and again, if anybody knows of anything for your family, anybody that you know of, we're here to be of service. You can always give us a call, text, email, anything like that. And again, just want to thank you deeply from the bottom of my heart. Awesome.
Good job, man.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cool. Any thoughts, any questions, concerns? Yes, sir.
So you'll appreciate this. I was always fascinated by how the autonomic nervous system is divided anatomically.
Mm-hmm.
So the parasympathetic is cranial and sacral, and the sympathetic is spinal.
Mm-hmm.
Do you guys leverage that anatomy with your techniques to upregulate parasympathetic and downregulate sympathetic?
Yeah. So it goes actually a lot deeper than that as well. And that's exactly what I referred to. So the question was, in chiropractic, we're taught that to activate parasympathetics, that tends to be more of an upper cervical, upper neck sort of thing, as well as kind of sacrum. The thoracics largely are what's contributed to kind of more sympathetic tone. It's oftentimes taught like, don't adjust the thoracics if there's already high sympathetic tone. What we're able to do using the scanning technology that we found is, again, we take that factor into play, but we kind of build up to those areas. I mentioned earlier, if there's a chronically suppressed or underdeveloped, never developed parasympathetic vagal tone, we can't just go into the upper cervical. Maybe they're not ready for it. Sometimes we see in the surface EMG that their thoracolumbar area around their core, things like that, has very exhausted low tone. What we do is we look at where is any areas of exhaustion first. Let's get in there. Let's awaken that area, so to speak, to build more of a stable foundation and platform so that we can absolutely, we want to get to those higher areas, but we kind of have to help the body catch up. One thing I didn't really talk about is we refer to things as what we call the neurological soft signs. So think of the scenario: mother brings child in for seizures. What does mom want? She wants those seizures gone, not just today, not just yesterday, but to have never happened, right? That's a very high level function issue, challenge, or problem, right? Oftentimes what we find in those cases, in cases of autism and similar, is that they have very poor sleep, irregular sleep, not able to get to sleep, stay asleep, erratic sleep, movement and sleep, all these sorts of stuff, poor digestion, constipation chronically, more common than diarrhea, right? But just, we have to get that foundation online, activated, calm, and regulated before we can start to get to, in that pyramid, the higher level brain function. So yeah, that's absolutely a case.
Like you guys are going way above this typical craniosacral stuff that people do, which I think sometimes can be beneficial.
Right.
It sounds like there's a little more to it.
A little bit, that's a good way to put it. So it sounds like, a little bit more to it. Absolutely. So that's still definitely a component to it. But oftentimes, and especially the more challenging cases, we can't just jump right to, oh, hey, parasympathetics shut down, let me jump up here. They're not going to let you in. We kind of have to build that foundation, kind of thinking of it as like an on-ramp or, an on-ramp to get there. Yeah, absolutely.
I love the fact you're utilizing thermography and surface EMG.
Yep.
That's important stuff.
Yep. Thank you. So just for the camera and those at home, he said he loves that we're using thermography and surface EMG as very valuable, very important stuff. Again, gives us more insights. We're all trained really well. She doesn't know a stranger. We're all trained really well to identify things, area, stress, tension, all this sort of stuff with our hands, right? But there's often, as this shows, there's some components that let's just get some more information. And oftentimes also in those challenging cases with autism and things like that, when they're not just going to lay down on a table, let you palpate, do all these sort of tests, let's get some information, see what areas we need to address first, go in, get out, give them just what they can handle. We're not adjusting multiple areas all at once. We're maybe focusing on one, maybe two if there's a pairing, things like that, right? But let's really build up that foundation to where we can eventually kind of get to those more crucial areas.
Wow. So I came today because I have a 13, 15, and 17-year-old grandchildren that were all C-section, emergency C-sections.
Okay.
I am floored. Whew, without trying to get emotional here, because so much of this is what we have seen. And it's just, so now they're older, and just last year, he was 14 then, finally he was diagnosed with high level of autism and Asperger's or whatever. And what we have gone through with this kid, and he is still, he's high function, he's smart, super smart, intelligent, but he's still bedwetting, and he is banged, he headbangs. Since he was a baby, he headbangs. We don't know what to do. We don't know what to do. So they live in Jacksonville.
Gotcha.
Is this something then that would help? And then the other one has the sensory perception. I mean, so much of this was
Yeah.
right on target with everything that my daughter disconnected from the kid, you know, when they were born at first.
Oh,
I mean,
wow.
it was a whole lot of traumas with these kids and
Yeah.
still going through.
So
At their age, though,
yeah, absolutely.
and insurances probably don't even cover this kind of stuff. Right?
Oftentimes, no. Oftentimes, no. So,
But it would
so the
help.
question was, she has grandchildren of 13 plus 8 years of age, with recently diagnosis of autism, and still having at that age struggles with bedwetting and a lot of stimming, right, when they're kind of banging their heads. So absolutely, it very much so greatly helps. There's so many peers and cases of kiddos that have benefited, and even early young adults that have benefited from this type of care with all those sorts of challenges. I haven't looked, but I can and I should look. There is a website. That's what I got my certification through, PX Docs, the letter PX, DOCS, docs.com, has a directory of all the certified chiropractors with this knowledge and information and resources throughout the world. So we have international doctors as well, but absolutely. We can look and see if there's anybody up in Jacksonville. I just frankly haven't looked, but they.
So how often would you need to see them? Depends on once you. I mean, Jacksonville is only an hour from here. I mean, it's not like it.
Yeah. So we have lots of peers up in Georgia, for example, right? That they have patients that come and see them. In couple of things from state lines that travel a long period of time. They also do what's called intensive cases, where people travel from different states or other countries to come do an intensive, sometimes 2 weeks long, couple months long, things like that, where maybe we're seeing them a couple of times a day, maybe every day for an intensive period. Again, building off of neuroplasticity, that kind of repetition, building that reconnection and all that. So yeah, it all really depends. It all just gets started with, again, deep dive into their case history, also performing those scans. That's really what we use together to customize and tailor what does that look like as far as timing, frequency, and longevity of care.
Wow. I mean,
Yeah.
I've never heard of pediatric. It's so true. I mean, when you think of chiropractor, you only think of adjustments, adults and adjustments.
Right.
Never in my life have I ever thought of,
Yeah.
I've never heard of this before.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, all the more, valuable and important. And again, thank you for attending and being so open and hearing that. Yeah. So another thing I find fascinating is that stimming, right? That head banging. They taught in the certification that's oftentimes that awareness, again, that noise is so loud or things are so revved up.
But even in his sleep, and he's been doing it since he was a baby, and he still does it. You can hear all that banging, and he still does it.
Yeah, it's kind of a way of them, how I've heard it explained is they're trying to kind of self-adjust in a way, right? There's so much suck tension, they're either trying to release some of that, but can't. They're trying to just discharge that energy any which way. That's why stimming kind of looks like lots of different things. But really that's oftentimes what that comes from, is that ramped up, revved up,
So
overdrive nervous
people
system.
see them in the street, and there's some good-looking kids. I mean, they're my grandkids, but there's some good-looking kids, and they look so normal. And people like in the store, it's like, why are they acting like this? Because they look normal.
Yeah.
And so.
And that just goes back to and amplifies the challenge then for the kiddo, but then also the family, right? There's that sense that I can't go out in public. I can't do the things that I want to do. I can't take them the places that I want to take them to. I can't have the experiences that I want to experience with them of travel or this and that, because we got to stay guarded where, they're not going to be judged. I'm not going to be judged, all these sorts of things, right? So again, that's where that sort of change is really life impacting, because it has ripples in the community.